first step to making our quiche is to prepare the dough. And so what we want to do in a food processor is add our cake flour and our salt and make sure that that's well distributed. So pulse that for a few times. Then you want to add your butter. Make sure your butter is cubed and it is cool, so it should be chilled. And kind of mix that up in there so that it's not in one large piece. Place the top on and pulse this for a few times until it gets to a very coarse meal. It's going to start to break up the butter, and if you've gone too far, you'll know because it will become a solid dough. What we're looking for is the butter to get absorbed into the flour, which will create a more moist looking product. It will turn slightly yellowish, and the size of the butter will be very small. Now normally when we do a pie dough, it'll say pea size or walnut size, but in this case we want our butter to be very small. So if I sift this, you see there's still kind of like a pea size. So we're gonna go a little bit further with this so that there are a little bit smaller pieces of butter in there, which means the flour would have absorbed the moisture from that butter. So we're going to feel it again, and this is a course meal, so I don't really feel any chunks of butter in there, which is great. So now I'm going to add my moisture, which is my egg, and it's only 1 ounce of egg, so that means I need to beat the egg up and then measure it so that I'm not getting all the whites or all of the yolks. And I'm going to let this go into the mix while I'm pulsing, and then add my water as well. Same method. Trying not to overmix this dough, but allowing the dough to form. So as soon as you can see it from the top, it form a ball. That dough is done. So once your ball has been formed, you want to remove it from your food processor. Be very careful, and I usually take my blade out first. And then I have a piece of parchment ready, and my bowl scraper, I remove the rest of the dough from my container. I'm gonna press down this dough. It should be nice and evenly distributed. And depending on whether you're doing a rectangular or a circular tart, you want to shape your dough in that shape to start with. So I'm going to do a circular one. So I'm going to shape it in a disc, and it's going to be about 3/4 inch thick. And then I'm just going to place it in my parchment and cover it like this and place it in the refrigerator until it's set, about a good hour to 2 hours. Then we're ready to roll it out and make our filling. So now it's time to roll out our dough. We've let it rested for at least an hour on the parchment paper, and it's firm but not hard. So this is a much easier time to roll this out. We want to dust the top with a little bit of flour and move it around. And then I'm going to dust my board. I like to do it directly on the board, not on the parchment paper. I'm going to flip it over so that both sides now have the flour on it, and I'm going to save the parchment paper so I can use that for blind baking. So just in case your edges are a little cold, you can just kind of smush them in with your fingers, making it nice and round and warming it up at the same time. All right, we want to use as little flour as possible to make it not stick, but please make sure you do use the flour to prevent it from sticking to the board or the rolling pin. So what I want to do is I want to roll my rolling pin, putting the pressure in the middle and really pushing down and moving it all the way throughout the dough. Then I'm going to turn the dough while making sure that it has plenty of flour on the bottom, and then roll the other direction, maintaining a nice circular shape the entire time. What I don't want to do is roll over the edge to smush it down. So I want to bring it together, any uneven edges or cracking edges, again, with my fingers and moving it in a circle. So moving it every time will ensure that it's not sticking to your board, and adding slightly small amounts of flour each time. So I want to roll this out and turn it a quarter turn until it reaches an 1/8 of an inch thick. How do we know that? We're going to put our fingers up underneath and we're going to feel the thickness of it. So I'll continue to do this in this motion until it's 1/8 of an inch thick. When you've reached an 1/8 of an inch thick, then you can grab your tart pan to make sure that you are wide enough. So it should encompass the width of the tart pan plus some for the height of it as well. So we have plenty to work with right here. And I'm gonna set this aside and grab my rolling pin and roll back up onto the rolling pin and lift it up. It is so easy to work with this dough when it is cold. So don't let this come to room temperature and you won't have any issues with it. So what I want to do is I want to lean over and look to see where I'm at and make sure that I am centered on my tart, and I am just letting it gently fall into place without rolling it on top, because I don't want to cut my edges just yet. I want to lift the dough up and with my finger push it into the groove. So I will go around in a circle to make sure that it is set inside the tart pan and there is no gap like this. Once your inside edges are nice and even and you feel like it's sitting down on the metal and up against the sides, now is the time to go ahead and cut your edges. So you can just simply take your rolling pin and roll it along the top edge, and then reserve this if you'd like to use it again to roll it out for another quiche. I'm going to press this up against the sides to make sure it's adhered. And then we're going to let this rest for a good 20-30 minutes in the refrigerator, but we can prepare it so it's ready to go into the oven. So what I want to do, instead of poking holes in that, because we don't want our filling to run through and get stuck on the other side, we want to blind bake. So I'm going to use that same piece of parchment paper, reuse that, place it on the inside of my tart, and use my baking beans that we'll use as pie weights. So this will weigh down the dough. It won't allow it to puff up, but we only want single layer so that it will still brown. And then it's ready to go into the oven. But first we're gonna chill this and let it rest, let the gluten rest so it won't wanna shrink. We're gonna place this onto a sheet pan into the refrigerator for 20 to 30 minutes. So in my oven, after about 20 minutes at 350, it's still very light, so I just removed the parchment with the beans, and I'm going to cook it for another 5 or so minutes until it gets a nice light golden brown and sets. When your quiche dough is done, it should generally pull away from the sides a little bit, so there will be a gap in there, and so be very careful when you add your quiche mixture later on that it doesn't overflow, otherwise it'll get stuck underneath the dough instead of be suspended within. So this is a nice light golden brown. I could tell that it's fully cooked, and I'm ready to add all of my toppings. You can be creative with meats, cheeses, vegetables, anything in here. As long as you have your base, you can add whatever you want, as little or as much as you want into the tart crust. When you're ready to make your quiche filling, you can choose any vegetables and herbs and cheese that you like, but what's most important is that your base is consistent. So we have in here milk and cream heating. You can also use half and half if you happen to have that. And then I have my whole eggs and my egg yolks. We're going to combine these together along with my salt and pepper, and I'm just going to whisk this until smooth. Make sure sure your bowl is large enough to accommodate some of the cream and milk mixture into here. And then we will heat our milk cream just to a boil and then go ahead and temper it into our eggs. So as soon as your cream and milk mixture just start coming to a simmer, you want to then take this and pour it over your egg mixture. So we're going to whisk the eggs in the bowl while I'm very slowly pouring the milk and cream into there. Now typically in a custard that we were going to thicken on the stove, we would pour this back into the pan and thicken it. But because this is going to be an oven thickened custard in the quiche, we do not want to go back onto the stove. So pour all of your mixture into your eggs, whisking vigorously so as not to cook them. And then you can let this sit for a while, or you can pour it directly into the quiche shell when it's ready. So even if you have extra of your tart base, do not add it all if it looks like it's gonna overflow. I put a lot of fillings in there, fresh vegetables that I've sauteed, and cheeses and herbs. So it just depends on your liking whether you want more egg filling or more of your garnish fillings. So I have extra, that means you can use that extra dough and the extra filling and make another small quiche if you like. This is ready to go into the oven for another about 20 minutes or so. What you're looking for is for it to set, and we'll check that in a little bit. 350 on the sheet pan. When the quiche is done, what you want to do is shake it, and it should be nice and solid. So you can touch the center too, and it's nice and firm without being too brown. And so what you want to do is let it completely cool. Then we're going to remove it from the pan and from the bottom, and then you just cut it and serve it. When the quiche is completely cool, you want to remove it from the tart pan by grabbing up underneath and just sliding it right off of the base. Feel free to cut it and decorate it as desired. I have some extra herbs here, nice fresh herbs. And these are chive flowers, the blossoms. So it gives it a really beautiful flavor and color. And then we're just going to cut this. And the best way to cut it is use the tip of the knife, push all the way through, and then down, drag it back, and all the way down and drag it out. And then you can go ahead and cut however many pieces you like. Enjoy!